The cost of IT in business can be staggering. From hardware and software expenses to services like internet and phone, you don't need to spend a fortune on IT to succeed. If your organization spends more than $500 monthly on any service, or you're considering signing a long-term contract, IT Enabled can help you manage your technology and minimize your costs. Contact us today to schedule a free consultation. IT Enabled, we're here to help.
Hi, I'm Tara Watson-Watkins, President and CEO of the Lufkin Angelina County Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to the Connect podcast, connecting business to community. I'm here today with my co-host, Blake Polino with VP Media Group.
All right, so really fun episode here this week where I got to nerd out about all the cool how it's made manufacturing process. So we brought in Jenna Richards of Lufkin Gears Baker Hughes here in Lufkin to talk about this huge building downtown that we all drive by. And if you really wanted to know what's going on in there, this episode is for you. Super interesting. Talks about their history, how they've evolved and changed as a company here in Lufkin, and answers a lot of questions about how that process has gone. So let's jump into that episode now.
Well, we are excited today to have friends from Baker Hughes with us on the podcast. Welcome to the Connect podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Of course. Why don't you introduce yourselves, kind of give your background history, and then we'll talk about the company.
Okay. You want to go first, Ed? Or you?
I'd be glad to.
Okay.
My name's Ed Martin. I've worked for Lufkin Gears now for 31 years. It's my first job out of college, and it hasn't gotten boring yet, so I'm still there.
That's great.
Yeah.
And you're in the engineering department.
That's right.
Yep.
I'm sorry. Yes.
He's our technical expert, so that's why I brought him with us today.
Nice.
I'm Jenna Richards. I've been with Lufkin for my entire career also, right out of college. I started in 2007. And I started in the oil field division, which most everyone I feel like is most familiar with in this area. Yeah. I think the famous Rudolph lends to that. I transitioned over to the power transmission business in 2017, at the end of 2017, as the plant manager. And today I'm the site leader. I feel like in the U.S. we would commonly call it a general manager, like a regional general manager. Yeah. So I'm happy to be here today and talk about Lufkin Gears. So we are a Baker Hughes business, but we do have our own autonomous gear business called Lufkin Gears. So I kind of wanted to come and talk about the business and let you guys know who we are.
Yeah, I think that's the question that probably most people ask y'all is, Lufkin Industries versus Lufkin Gears versus Baker Hughes. And then it gets all confusing from there.
Yeah.
So GE into the mix.
That's
too.
right. Yes, that's right. So who is Lufkin Gears? Let's just start there.
So maybe we'll go back all the way in time.
Okay.
So 1902 is when Lufkin Industries was founded. You guys are probably familiar with that. And I brought my little book for the legacy Lufkin business. But our business was born out of that. Around 1917, Lufkin kind of shifted their focus to the oil and gas industry. And the reason that is important is because they developed a gear-driven rod beam sucker rod pump jack unit. So it doesn't look exactly like it looks today when you guys see Rudolph. Yeah. But the reason that is important is, and that's why I kind of brought this so I could point it out to you guys, but the gearbox is where we developed our expertise. So that's the reason that's important. So in 1917, we shifted focus to that and developed the gear-driven sucker rod beam unit. So in 1923 is when we produced that. In 1939, we actually expanded into the commercial gear business. From there, you guys may have seen several things and changes, GE, things closing with Lufkin and all of that. So I wanted to come on today and explain how we fit into that. So in 2013 is when GE acquired the Lufkin business. And from there, we kind of got a lot of bad publicity, I feel like, with that. The foundry was shut down and closed in 2015. We did, in our business, a consolidation of rooftops. So we closed the gear repair facility and incorporated that into our manufacturing facility today. So where we are, downtown Lufkin, basically, is we're manufacturing the new equipment and we're also repairing the gearboxes. So Lufkin Gears designs, as Ed is very well involved in, and manufactures industrial gearbox solutions. So the industrial gearbox business, we feed several industries. I mean, I brought a few of them with me today, but Oil and gas makes up about 50% of our business. And I think that's kind of what's unique about us is we're still able to go with the ebbs and flows, and we're not just completely dependent on the oil and gas business. So we do things for power applications, cement, mining, rubber and tire, sugar, marine, chemical, plastics, all of those kinds of things. So several different industries that our gearboxes actually feed into. So I think it's pretty cool when you go look at some of these pictures, and then you can kind of see where does it go in the application of the box. So from there, we did the restructuring in 2015 to consolidate the rooftops. Like I said, we folded the services and repair business into the new unit manufacturing facility that we're located in today. And then in 2017, there was the Baker Hughes and GE kind of had an acquisition, if you will, of the legacy GE oil and gas business. So we were part of the legacy GE oil and gas segment. And then we were folded into the BHGE entity. So this is where things start to get really muddy and confusing. At this point in time, we are still Lufkin Industries, one legal entity combined with the OFS business that we call it Oilfield Services. And our segment is TPS, so Turbo Machinery Process Solutions. But we were all still one legal entity. So that kind of made it a little bit more muddy. And then in 2019, GE decided to divest from Baker Hughes. So now we were standalone with Baker Hughes, separated from GE, still one legal entity, legacy Lufkin Industries. Okay. Then in 2020, we actually divested from the legacy Lufkin Industries business.
That's not confusing at all.
not at all.
Very difficult to follow.
Timeline for this podcast.
That is exactly what I do. So when customers come in, I literally have a little timeline.
Okay, that makes sense.
To talk through all of this, and when you're able to look at it on a page, you're going, okay, so now I'm following. All right, and now we're here with our own autonomous gear business, Lufkin Gears, since 2020. So that's kind of in a nutshell of the history and how we unfolded to be the Lufkin Gears business today.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. So I had an opportunity here recently to tour the facility. We were doing a location scout for some video work, and when they talk about gears, I think a lot of times people think just the small mechanical pieces that go in like a clock or something like that.
Yeah.
These things are huge. They're massive.
Yes.
I mean, they're like bigger than rooms. I mean, there's some of these gearboxes that, and we got to talking to some of the engineers that you have there and talking about just like some of the tolerances that these things are made out of. I mean, these are just some of the smallest measurements I've ever seen.
Fraction of a hair.
Exactly, like a 10,000th of an inch.
It's incredible.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, he got a set of calipers and showed me how thick a piece of paper was, and that was just like huge compared to how they were measuring some of these other things. It was really, really
You must have gone through the
eye-opening.
grinding room that was climate controlled,
We
plus
went
or
through
minus 1 degree.
we went through the whole place, which it's a massive facility. I mean, everything that's going on there. I mean, you would imagine as big as some of these pieces of equipment are, and it's so fascinating to me. I love that about what we do is we get to go in and see kind of behind the scenes how different businesses operate. And it just blows my mind sometimes that like this is an entire industry within itself that just makes these massive pieces of machining. It's just really, really cool.
I'm really glad you brought that up because our facility is huge. It's about 400,000 square feet under roof just for the shop portion. And then we've got the office space. I think in total it's probably 500,000 square feet when you look at the whole facility. So it's very large. And we've got about a little over 200 employees for the Lufkin segment. We also have a sister facility in Fougerolles, France. So the total power transmission business is not just here in Lufkin, Texas. So we have a plant in Fougerolles, and then we also have some engineering expertise in the UK. So we have also an Allen Gears business as well. But the total footprint for PT, we've got over 500 employees, and it's pretty well evenly split between us and Fougerolles, and then maybe about 30 or so for the UK or something like that. So we have a pretty big footprint, and the size piece is crazy. So when you walk through the shop, this is something that we might change. It's not that we run all big stuff at once. You may have a box that's as big as this room, and then right next to it, you'll have the box that's maybe this big.
A toolbox
a little
size.
bigger than a shoebox, I say. So
Yeah.
we are able to adapt and change quite frequently.
And we hardly ever build the same gearbox twice. So,
Right.
and that's why it hasn't gotten boring for me in 31 years. We
Yeah.
can make gearboxes that spin 1 RPM up to, Jenna will probably cringe when I say this, but I had my hands on a gearbox on the test stand that was spinning 70,000 RPM.
Wow.
We don't do that anymore due to
Right.
safety reasons,
Right.
not or put your hands on the gearbox. But, and from, just a few horsepower to 120,000 horsepower. So,
Right.
and a lot of them are similar, and we can, we don't have to necessarily start the design from scratch, but some of them, a lot of them, you just kind of start with a clean sheet of paper and design them and build them and test them and ship them.
I saw some of the behind the scenes in the design process. I mean, it's really technologically advanced. Like these aren't like really, you say you kind of start with a sheet of paper, but there's a lot of technology. I mean, these are 3D renderings. I mean, not really a physical drawing board anymore that these go into. But one of the things that was interesting to me is there was a lot of old machinery there, like decades old gearboxes that were still there. Can you explain that process and kind of why you do that? That as far as the service and things that go into those?
In terms of the old equipment, meaning the gearboxes, or the equipment that were like the machinery in the facility?
The old gearboxes. Like they were explaining that you would keep these old ones around just in case you need to service them for things that are still out in the field. Is that kind of how that process works?
So I don't know if you were maybe looking at a customer furnished gearbox that comes in
Could
for
have been.
repair, but yes, that's not unlikely at all. I mean, we've got, the fleet is over, I don't know how many thousands of gearboxes we have in the fleet.
Tens of
thousands. I think it's over 20-something thousand.
Wow.
So some of these gearboxes, and that's what has the strong Lufkin name, is these things run for 20, 30, sometimes even longer than that. And the customers will send them in for repair. If the gears are still okay, we might just do, some minor repairs, kiss grind the teeth and put it back together and send it back out. In some cases, the gears may be demolished and we have to completely make new ones from scratch. Or the customers may have kind of a spare program at their facility where they have spare gear sets that they keep on hand, and they'll send it in with the box, and we'll put the new gears in and then make them new ones for them to keep back at their spares.
That's great. I love that. So how have things changed as you've gone through this whole legacy transition, and how has that changed your business as you've gone through?
I would say the actual business itself has not changed. The image is what we're struggling with, and that's part of the reason why we're here today.
Sure.
Is people don't really understand that we're separate from the OFS business, the oilfield services business. In terms of what that looks like, I mean, you might have different processes that you have to go through because we are managed from Florence. Our headquarters is in Florence, or my boss is in Florence, and a lot of the leaders are there. But maybe there's a little more corporate kind of stuff that goes on behind the capital investments and that kind of thing, where you have a corporate budget and it gets pushed down to the different divisions. But in terms of us as a business, I wouldn't say anything has changed, other than it is a little different that we're also doing repairs in the same facility as the new equipment. Ed can probably speak to that more than me because he's seen all of the changes, which is part of the reason why I brought him with me today.
Well, yeah, there's been a lot of changes since I started. You mentioned drafting boards. When I first came in, we still had a few drafting boards, but we started with 2D CAD packages, now 3D CAD packages, like you mentioned, where we can take a model the gearbox and see how things fit together, make sure we don't have problems, and then we can export that to other software that you can do analysis, stress analysis, things like that. But as far as the GE Baker Hughes merger and takeovers, I would say it hasn't really changed a whole lot. There are pros and cons to being part of a big business. You go from being on a first name basis with the CEO to now, it's the Baker Hughes is so huge, you don't get that same relationship. However, they've got a whole lot of resources that you can draw on, and so that helps a lot. But there are pros and cons, but for the most part, my job, I would say, hasn't changed very much.
Still making gears.
Right.
Right.
Love that.
Where do you see your business in the next 5 to 10 years? What do you think will be happening?
So we have actually gotten a lot of investment, which I think is important to understand. You guys actually came out to our ribbon cutting that we had for our heat treat facility. So just that one investment was around $3 million. So Baker Hughes does see the value in our business, and part of it is because we are kind of a niche category, and we're not just totally dependent on one segment like oil and gas, for example. So I would say we are a strategic piece of the playbook, even though we may be a small piece of the revenue or margin that they see from the total TPS business. But they definitely are investing, and we have, a long range plan. I would say this next year, we're supposed to have like a 20% growth. We've got headcount that we're looking at for maybe increases of about 10% over the next couple of years to increase the headcount. And some of that is strategic investment to look into different segments. And then where the markets are looking, carbon capture and decarbonization and carbon footprint, all of that is important for a lot of our customers. I mean, we've got big players like Shell and Chevron, and those guys are looking out, and they've got long range plans, 30 years from now to have zero emissions or however much reduction in emissions. And so that's kind of what Ed was talking about, is really neat to be a part of in terms of the Baker Hughes resource pool. So we have NPIs that happen, and engineering is looking at doing things for CCUs, they call them, so carbon capture. Ed, I don't know if you want to talk some to any of that.
Well, sure. Yeah, it's very interesting and exciting, but it's with the climate change and people trying to reduce carbon emissions, they're looking at carbon sequestration, where you capture carbon and take it out, make sure it doesn't get to the atmosphere, or hydrogen, where they're using hydrogen as a fuel because it burns much cleaner. But these processes require high horsepower, high ratio gearboxes that are kind of push us to the limits of what we've done in the past. And so we're looking at new ways to be able to meet this demand, and some of it's coming up with new designs that split the torque into several different directions and come back together, and so that you can reduce the stresses on the parts, or reduce the speed of the part, or what we call the pitch line velocity. But it's very interesting. It's exciting, and we're heavily involved in the future of that business.
Yeah, and those kinds of things even lend towards additional investment. So he mentioned is pushing the limits. So we have some test stand capability limitations today to be able to fully capture that market in the future. So looking at what does the total market value look like for that, and how can we play a part, and what do we think we need to invest to be able to get there, are some of the things that we're doing today. So we have strategic meetings where we're looking long term to be able to capture that kind of stuff. But definitely looking at growing and investing.
That's great.
And so with that, obviously would come, additional headcount and more jobs.
Yeah,
in the area.
love that.
So if you could simplify what you want the public that's listening to know about Lufkin Gears, Baker Hughes, Lufkin Industries, all of that, what is your simple, you're here?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. We are still here.
Yeah.
It's amazing when we go out into the public and have conversations with people. I mean, we did the little, the stock market challenge,
Right.
and even talking to the kiddos there, I'm like, do you know who we are in Lufkin Gears? And they're like, nope. And so that's kind of a little bit heartbreaking.
Yeah.
So we went through and talked a little bit about the story and what we do, and everybody's like, oh, wow, that's really cool. But I think the main thing is we're still here. We're still manufacturing gears, and we're still looking to grow in a more strategic way than ever before, with all of the climate change and initiatives that are coming from the government. So I think we really have a platform to kind of leap to the next level, if you will, over the next 5 to 10 years. But, we're here. Our purpose statement, I brought it for you guys on our little calendars, but we're here to provide reliable power transmission technologies and services to solve the unique needs of every application across industry segments. So heavy industry, and when you sit back and think about bringing energy to the world, that to me is what's really neat. So you look at a gearbox and you don't really know where it goes, but that's why I brought some of this for you guys to look at so you can see, okay. I mean, even this plastic bottle, for example. Okay, we don't make the plastic bottle, but we have large extruder gearboxes that are in plants that make the plastic pellets that make these bottles.
That's right.
So even with the COVID situation, a lot of our customers were booming because so many people were working from home and staying at home. So these plastic guys, I mean, they're struggling to keep up.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
absolutely.
Well, we appreciate y'all being on here, and we appreciate the fact that you are still here,
Yes.
and that you're making an impact, with economic development into Lufkin and Angelina County. And we as a chamber want to make sure that we help promote you and that we help tell your story. And so we're thrilled that you could come on the podcast today and let the listeners know that you're here. You're
Yes.
not going anywhere. You're here for the long haul.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Thanks for
you.
having us.
Thank you for
Yeah.
having us.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about? I love nerding out about this
Glad
product.
you
How
said that.
how it's made is like one of my favorite shows of all time, and like getting to walk through these facilities is just like getting to see that in real life. So if people want to learn more about your process and what you do, and where can they do that?
We actually have a website. If you type on lufkingears.com, it should take you to our Baker Hughes
Great.
page that's linked in. You're not going to get all of the intricacies, but you can troll around in there and see some of the different things and,
Very cool.
and pictures and stuff like that. We actually have a guy at the facility today, so we're working on making a video that actually will show some of the machining processes and the overview of the plant. So we'll get that out there as well. We also have a LinkedIn page. Lufkin Gears on LinkedIn.
Perfect.
So we'll post videos and pictures and stuff like that on that feed as well.
Nice.
Love it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate
Thank
you coming
you.
on the podcast. And thank you so much for listening to the podcast again this week. We truly appreciate you listening. And if you want to watch the video version of this podcast, you can catch it on the Chamber Facebook page and on the Chamber YouTube page. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.